podcast too.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Making the Grade, our weekly foray into the PFF grades from the Cardinals' most recent game, which this week was not very good. It started out not too bad. They were hanging in there till the half, and they were making a game of it. And then Jamar Chase kind of things, right? And they just really, the Bengals I think this was a get right game for the Bengals, team that people thought had, playoff aspirations going into the season and started out slow. Joe Burrow started off really slow, but he's definitely shown that he's healthy, and looks like Bengals are going to be getting their ship straight now. But we're here to talk about the Cardinals, and that's a little less encouraging, right? So we're going to do what we do, which is we're going to get into the PFF grades. We're going to look at the data, see the stories it's telling us, talk about what was going on, look at some trends going on, and kind of commiserate a little bit about this loss. So real quick, let me say hey to some of the folks in the chat. We got Nick L. Marco Wilson gets an F+. Man, Marco Wilson showed some promising signs last season. It has been a rough go of it this season. He's in a different role. He's cornerback one. He's the number one cornerback on this defense. So he's getting picked on. I don't know how much of it is just that he's now the number one cornerback going against the best receivers. That makes a difference in what the performance looks like in the grades. I don't know how much of it is a new system. Whatever it is, it's been rough, and we'll talk about that. Silverwolf AZ, did DJ Humphries grade as bad as he looked? No, he actually graded reasonably well, and we'll see that. So he may have had a couple bad snaps. I mean, it wasn't amazing, but his grade was reasonably good. So yeah, but there were the offensive line, and we'll get into that, didn't grade as poorly as they have in recent games. So that wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem we'll see was, quarterback play was a big problem. We'll talk about that. Some coverage issues. Dobbs to the moon, right? The aerospace science guy who is our quarterback, right? We'll talk about that a good bit. He had a rough game, but this is what you get with a backup quarterback when they start enough games, right? It's going to be up and down, but we'll talk about Xbox Fanatic. I love making it to these live streams. Well, we love having you here. Thanks for hanging out with us. This has become one of my new favorite things. It's this and Mock Draft Monday. Those are the two things that I really enjoy the most that we do here on the channel. So I'm glad you can hang out with us. We have Grandizer doing what Grandizer does, holding it down in the chat, getting the links in there. Appreciate you. Solo today, yeah, for the Mock Draft Monday, the Making the Grade live streams, I'll probably be solo most weeks. I might have a guest here or there, but tomorrow night, I have lined up a guest who is a podcaster, Josh Butts from the No Butts About It football podcast, who is a Bengals fan. So he'll be here to talk about from the Bengals perspective. Jordan P, Zach Pascal, F, we'll get to that. Yeah. Saltiest Gaming, appreciate you being here. What's up, my friend? Saying hit the like button. Thank you for doing that. Make sure you follow him. He does gaming content and also Arizona sports content. Jordan P, Mock Draft Monday is going to be amazing this year. 2 first round and 11 picks early on. Yeah, 11 picks overall, 6 or 7 picks in the first couple days. Yeah, that's going to be awesome. So, all right, so let's get into it. We're going to look at the grades. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. We'll do a quick scan of the grades, and then we'll get into some of the position groups, right? James Conner, and obviously, we're disappointed to see he's going to be out. We don't know how long. It does not sound like it's going to be season ending, but it does sound like he will miss some time. So, as nice as his grade was and as nice as his performance has been this season, the cog on offense that has made everything go is going to be out for a while. So, that's concerning, but he had the highest grade on offense, 83.3. We see a couple reasonably good grades. Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown had a good game, right? He looked good. Humphreys, Hernandez, DeMarcado, so on and so forth. Then we get down to the grades a lot in the 50s. There weren't the offensive grades, there weren't any of these orange or red, the grades in the 20s and 30s. So, the grades here aren't as horrible as you might have, or at least one might have expected based on the way the game went. This isn't great. You don't want to see these yellows in the 50s and 60s, but, we've seen weeks where there's grades down here in the 30s and 40s. So the grades were meh. You know, there were a couple big mistakes, as we'll talk about, that really, really hurt things. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. Real quick, Peter K, thanks for being here. Dobbs' grade has to be pretty bad. It's not great. 53 or 53.7. Not as bad as maybe some people expected. He had a couple big mistakes, but for the rest of the game, he looked okay, right? There were a handful of really bad plays, but Marco Wilson, it's not quite that bad, but it's bad. We'll get there. Sly, thanks for being here. Peterson's still available. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Saltiest Gaming saying this was the first week I was let down by the Cardinals. I mean, this was pretty I think, to me, the really disappointing thing is how much they let Jamar Chase run free. I mean, they're going to get beat based on talent deficiencies this year. We've talked about that. But to let one player go off on you like that and not do some double team them, let someone else beat you kind of thing. But no, so listen, I still believe in this coaching staff and what Monty's doing, but it was disappointing for sure. So let's go ahead and sort this. I like to start with the offensive line. So I will sort it by pass blocking snaps. It's a good way to get the offensive lineman at the top. Starting with Paris Johnson Jr., good run block or pass blocking grade. Running blocking grade wasn't amazing. But overall, 61.8, reasonably, decent grade. The pass blocking was good. Paris Johnson Jr., we like what we're seeing from him. We believe in him. Even if the grades aren't super high, he's starting. He's going to get better. He's showing signs. We like what we're seeing from him. Will Hernandez has been the most steady offensive lineman so far for us, and he had another, decent game. The run blocking wasn't great. Pass blocking was really good. So, overall grade of 66.4. That was good. Furholt, this was his second best game. I think his best grade game was against Dallas, but he had a solid game. It wasn't stellar, but grade in the 60s is okay. The pass blocking grade 67.3 was decent. He was solid, right? Humphreys, we had a question about him earlier. 67.8. He was better in run blocking than pass blocking. It wasn't great, but it wasn't the worst. Wilkinson, this is actually I think his second best game, which is a very low bar. We've talked about how rough it's been for him. So Wilkinson didn't have a great game, but it wasn't as bad as it has been in the past. Then we have Tristan Colon. They continue to do that platoon thing we've seen, right? With Colon coming in for 9 passing snaps and 5 running snaps. Now, let me start by saying this. I looked at this grade and I was confused. I don't know exactly what PFF's formula is. They have a proprietary formula for each position, how they weight these things. Different things are weighted differently by position. This didn't make sense to me. Pass blocking grade of 81.9, run blocking grade of 66.9, but the offensive grade was 56.3, which is very low. The one thing you see here is there was a penalty. I do not know if and how penalties are weighed in to grades. This makes me suspect, though. I mean, he had only 14 snaps. Maybe that one penalty out of that amount of snaps really brought down that grade. So that I don't know. I wish someone from PFF could explain that. They do protect their formulas a little bit. But the grades here, looking at these, you would have expected the grade to be in the upper 60s or even lower 70s, right? But it was really low. So I guess that penalty did that. I don't know. So the offensive line performance was It wasn't the biggest problem, at least based on the grades. And watching the game to the eye test, there, I didn't feel like that was the biggest problem. It had its moments, right? Keith Davis, thanks for being here. Channel member, longtime supporter. Really appreciate you. Dobbs could have had 5 picks. The Bengals dropped a bunch of potential picks. Defense seems to be regressing. Yeah. And we're going to talk about those turnover worthy plays that Dobbs, and I'm glad you brought that up. That is something that I actually kind of have on my list of things to talk about when we get to Dobbs. There were a couple other plays that could have been interceptions. Defense seems to be regressing. Yeah, the defense has, it has been better than people thought it would be, but people thought it would be historically bad. So that's a low bar. It's regressing a little bit. Some of that is, players are getting banged up. Some of it, I think, is we're already playing with talent that, is young and a lot of players that would be backups on other teams. And you can maybe only scheme that up so much for so long before maybe teams start to kind of figure out what you're doing and attack it. They need to build this roster with an infusion of talent that can, make that where the scheming and the talent work together instead of having to just rely on the scheming. Obviously, people who follow the draft and everything are hoping Garrett Williams gets up to speed and can maybe help with the cornerback room. But as good as he may be, you don't necessarily want to have to rely on a rookie to be your savior in that regard. So I like him. I liked the pick. I like his potential. I hope he gets to the speed, but I think the defense is going to struggle all year. So offensive line, not horrible, not great, right? So then let's go to the positions. Looking at the tight ends, right? Zach Ertz, he's had a rough go of it all year. He did have, the touchdown. He had a couple of nice catches. He led all tight ends and snaps. We've been looking at this throughout the year, and the snaps have been getting a little closer to even, but now we see it going back to Ertz getting majority of the snaps. Probably some game plan to that. 43 snaps. Jeff Swaim, he's been good for us as a, number 3 tight end. He led tight ends in grade, with 71.6, had a really good passing grade on 6 pass snaps. The pass blocking was a little bit low, run blocking was a little bit low. But he had a solid game. Ertz, McBride in his limited snaps, 19, did some nice things, right? So, this is what we're seeing with the tight ends. We've been wanting to see McBride surpass Ertz in terms of being the number 1 guy. It still isn't happening. They're still relying on Ertz a bit, a good bit. So, that's what's going on there with the tight ends. But it is nice to see McBride grade well, so that's even if he's not getting as many snaps as we'd like, having good performances, every week we get a good performance from him is something we like. Look at the receivers. We've got, Rondale Moore had a couple nice plays. Overall, his grade wasn't great. I tell you, that sort of fake reverse, you all know the play I'm talking about, right? Where they handed it to him and he faked like he was going to hand off. And Drew Petzing, man, that's the offensive coordinator. That was a great play. Just that little look to throw off the defenders and give him time. Loved that play. But that's just one play out of 38. He had another play where he had some nice kind of jukes after catch, but yeah, overall didn't grade particularly well. Dortch, 1 snap. We want to see more Dortch. I get it. They use a lot of tight ends. So they're not going to use a lot of slot receivers, and Rondale Moore is going to get most of those snaps, unfortunately, for Greg Dortch. So Michael Wilson, I know, that was probably one of the more disappointing, not disappointed in him, but disappointed that he wasn't used more, had that one reception late in the game. Just not a lot of targets. His grade wasn't great. His blocking grade, though, listen, if you're not getting the looks, run block, right? Do what you can to help the team, and that'll keep you on the field. So we still love Michael Wilson. I started him in fantasy, was disappointed, that they didn't target him more, but he had, didn't have a very productive game. Pascal, 10 snaps, nothing much doing there. Right. And then Marquise Brown, we talked about, he had a really nice game. I think people who don't watch him think that he's just a guy who's just speed and takes the top off the defense, right? That he's just going to run go routes and he can do that. I mean, he has elite speed. He can be that guy. But man, he had that one catch where he made a couple guys miss. He is more elusive with the ball in his hands than I think people want to give him credit for. At least people don't watch him much. So he had a nice game, and it was, the grade was pretty solid. So that's what we're seeing with the receivers, right? Let me say hey to get a couple more comments in here. Sly saying Dobbs did enough to win the game. Secondary playing soft, 10 years off, and no jamming on the line. I mean, if the defense, he did enough. I mean, those turnovers, that interception, the pick 6 was rough. And the other turnovers were rough. If the defense, there was, they put up some points, right? So they had a chance to win if the defense could have done more. Yeah. But I think Dobbs did have a rough game, though. I will say this. Salty is saying Marco Wilson needs to be cut, to be honest. I mean, it's been rough. I still wouldn't cut him because the guy has his physical tools are some of them are off the chart. Guys that have his speed, his change of direction, his jump, all that. You know, maybe he needs to not be starting, or he certainly should not be the number one cornerback, in my opinion. But you stick with a guy like that, even if he's, you put him on the bench, and maybe he will, that will be what happens, but you try to see if you can make it work with that kind of talent. But man, I would love to see Williams, get a chance. If, get Keitrell Clark and Garrett Williams starting, have Marco Wilson, rotate in, but I'm not ready to cut him yet. But I mean, you're certainly not paying him big money after, I don't know if you're going to bring him back on a second contract unless you see some major change, but the physical traits are pretty impressive with him, but he's been disappointing. That's for sure. Chris Young, thanks for being here. Hey y'all. Maybe I'm just missing something, but I'm not sure why people seem to feel overly pessimistic after this game. We stayed within 2 scores, which honestly is enough for me. I mean, big picture, I'm still optimistic. The process and rebuild, it's work. I like what they're doing. Big picture, this game, I think fans just got used to feeling like, man, this Cardinals team is just a little kind of frisky, a little, overachieving. And I think a lot of fans thought, with as bad as things have been going for the Bengals, a lot of fans, I think, thought the Cardinals are going to pull off a win. So I think as expectations raise, disappointment can also become bigger, right? But I'm not, as much as I'm disappointed with the fact that they didn't win the game, I'm still big picture optimistic, about things. Jake Worley, thank you for being here. I want to know why Michael Wilson is not targeted till late. Made no sense to me. I don't know why, other than maybe something about the game plan. It's hard to know exactly why that was. I would like to see them feature him more. That's for sure. So Jake's saying, it's an interesting topic of convo to have on Brown. He's a free agent. Do they want to pay him that money, or do they let him walk, maybe even trade? I don't think it's that likely. Yeah, Hollywood Brown, that's Kyler's guy. Kyler has a rapport with him. I think they'll try to keep him around. I do. I think in a perfect world, you want him as your number 2. But if they go a tight end heavy kind of offense with running game heavy, and you've got Michael Wilson develop and him as your 2 receivers, I think if you get, good play out of the tight end and a good running game, you can go with those as your 2 outside receivers if Michael Wilson becomes who we think he's going to be, right? So, yeah. Sly saying, I checked the missing person database and still no sign of Dortch, right? Yeah, for sure. Marvin Harrison Jr., our future, maybe. I mean, I would love to see them pick him. That's for sure. That's the guy I would love to see, get him in there. I don't know. We'll see how it pans out, though. There's some teams that are kind of worse than us, so they might be ahead of us for that. So, all right. So we talked about the receivers. We talked about offensive line, tight ends, right? Let's talk about the running backs real quick. Obviously James Conner is going to be out for a while. Laqueta at fullback, not really much to say there. We know what's going on there. James Conner has been so good for us, and he's going to be out for a while. So, love Connor, but that's the deal with running backs, right? So, yeah, they get injured. Amari DeMarcado looked decent, right? I mean, his grade was 65.3. The run grade itself was 74.6. I will see how he looks with more touches if he indeed gets them. We don't know if Keontae Ingram is going to be back yet. If you've heard something, let me know. And they picked up a running back today, Tony Jones Jr. If you know his name, let me know in the chat. I saw it. I forget who it was. They've got Corey Clement still, right? They Damian Williams they picked up on the practice squad, who had been with us before. Now they're probably going to get him elevated. There's a good chance, right? So yeah, running back. James Conner's been so good. I just kind of am more of I'm in the kind of camp that believes running backs don't make as much of a difference as people think unless they're truly elite. I mean, it will make a difference, but I think I'm not super worried about what's going to happen with that. It's more about what the offensive line does. But, running backs, Demarcado is going to be interesting to see what he does and if Canty gets back. Jordan P saying, do you think we would pass on Marvin for a haul if he could? I actually don't. I understand the logic, and I know I saw you tweet about that, and I get that. And listen, I'm a believer in trading back and adding draft capital. If you followed kind of my content in Mock Draft Mondays, I was all about that, especially if you're looking at quarterback. But if they have two picks, right? If they've got the pick from Houston and our pick, and one of them is early enough to get Marvin Harrison Jr., and then you still have another first-round pick, I think you stick and pick Harrison Jr. And with that second pick, if you want to add draft capital, trade back from that, they already have a good haul of picks, and they're going to add more. And, in this most recent draft, remember, they did do the trade back, that got them that first round pick, but that wasn't the only trading they did. They moved around a few other times to add picks and things. So I think they're going to move up and down the board. I think they're going to do a couple different trades. But would they trade back? Would he? I think he could. He might. But I could easily see him sticking and picking someone like Marvin Harrison Jr. But we'll see what happens, right? It wouldn't shock me either way, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion he would trade out of that. Now, if it's early and it's a quarterback, then he's trading out and trading back, right? Ron Boyd Bubble, thanks for being here. Just pop in for a second. Out to dinner with the family. Hope all have a good night. I'll check back later, Joe. Appreciate you doing that. Robert Moore, what is up, my dude? Good evening, Joe. This year's going as planned. Be competitive. Check. Develop young players. Check. Have a bad record for good draft picks so far. Check so far, right? Yeah. So, and Chris agrees with you. Yes. So we talked about the running backs. Let's get to the quarterback, though. So Joshua Dobbs, graded at 53.7. But I want to talk about and look at, okay, there's this deeper stat that PFF has called, they have big time throws and turnover worthy throws. Now, this is the number of big time throws. If you remember last couple years, I think 2 years ago, Kyler Murray was like one of the league leaders in big time throws. And it's a stat that is basically, if you make a throw that is, amazing, right? Just this elite throw in a tight window. Think about that 2-point conversion that Kyler made right in the back of the end zone. That's probably a big time throw. Real quick, shout out to Corey Cards, who's got a really great podcast. What is up, my dude? Thanks for stopping by. Let me know. I'd love to jump on there with you. You just let me, reach out to me. I know you mentioned something about that. So love to get on there with you. They do a really, cool little podcast with him and Rashad and another gentleman who I don't know his name, but thanks for hanging out with us. But yeah, so the big time throws, you want those, but so this is big time throws, and this is the percent of your throws that are big time throws, right? Well, then we have turnover worthy throws. That's this column right here. Okay. And he has 7 turnover worthy throws. So this is an important stat because everyone talked about how he had no interceptions first, 4 games, and he had no interceptions first 4 games. That's a fact. But that doesn't mean he didn't have bad throws. A turnover worthy throw could mean it's thrown, should have been a turnover, but was dropped, right? And in the end, from a quarterback's performance, that is, and if you're grading the performance of a quarterback, a turnover worthy throw is as bad as an interception. And in some cases, it could be worse, because if there's an interception that was thrown to the receiver on his hands, popped up because the receiver, right, botched it, and then someone caught the interception, that's not on the quarterback, right? So you can have a situation where quarterback gets an interception, but it was actually a good throw. And then you can have a situation where it's just an incomplete pass, but it was a turnover worthy throw and he got lucky, got bailed out because the defensive player, had, butterfingers, right? So, he had, going into this game, 5 turnover worthy throws, right? And if we look at this, here's league leaders, okay? This is league leaders in turnover worthy throws, okay? Desmond Ridder, Mac Jones up here, Daniel Jones, Sam Howell, blah, blah, blah. Joshua Dobbs is tied, right? Here with 7, right? He's really, I guess, tied for 4th or whatever. It says 5th here. I guess, I don't know how that works if you have tying. I was told there'd be no numbers or math. All right. Anyway, he's up near the league leaders, right? He has a lot of turnover worthy throws. Okay. So even though he had no interceptions, we need to be aware of the fact that it doesn't mean he's been super safe with the ball. He's been a little lucky. Okay. Jake saying him forcing throws to Brown likely contributed to turnover throws. Wilson should have been picked him when he was forced. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. Slice saying Pascal's fault, right? So maybe some of those would have been yeah. And then Xbox Fanatic, does anyone have any interest in seeing the rookie get some snaps too specifically? I know a lot of people are calling for that. I have a philosophy why I don't necessarily want to see that, because I get why you want to see the rookie, but the quarterback is not the only person who's needing to develop. You have offensive linemen, receivers, running backs, tight ends. All those players are trying to develop as well. Okay. And if the offense can't function with even some reasonable modicum of effectiveness or efficiency, if you have a backup quarterback who can't get it going, and maybe you think Tune can, but if you have a backup quarterback and they are just really, shit in the bed really badly, then that is stunting the development of all the other players. So I think you actually want to have a guy like Dobbs in there who isn't Kyler Murray, but he's going to be better than Tune, I think, at this point. I mean, everyone wants to see the rookie, but the rookie is going to look like a rookie, I think. And I think the coaching staff knows what they're doing. And having Dobbs in there, even though he's going to have some bad games, we also see he's looked good at points and solid enough. So I think having him in there allows Michael Wilson to be in an offense that's functional and develop, right? Allows Trey McBride to continue to develop, allows Paris Johnson Jr. to develop in an offense that is able to function better. That's my philosophy. I understand why people, want Tune in there, but if he's not ready and it's looking bad, really bad, then everyone else's development is kind of on hold as well. So that's my philosophy for what it's worth. But Dobbs is coming back down to who he really is. And I'll tell you, I'm not as much as I'm disappointed by this game, it doesn't change my opinion on Dobbs or the Cardinals. Dobbs' performance, to me, as bad as it was, and as much as he had that pick six that makes me scratch my head and, face palm, whatever, right? Just kind of, oh, what the hell is that about? It doesn't bother me because I've had this big picture view of this. Dobbs is not a starting quarterback in the NFL in terms of what his profile is. He is a good backup. And a good backup is a guy who, if you have him start 3 games, he can win 2 of them for you. Or at least he can play well enough in 2 of them that you win and 1 of them you lose, right? If he could consistently play like he did in these 2 games here, right? Even these 3 games, is the second, third, and fourth game, if he could play like that all year long, he wouldn't be a backup. He would be a starting quarterback, but he's a backup because he has games like this mixed in, right? That's kind of the difference there. But it doesn't, it doesn't make me feel like we need to, get rid of him or not start him. I think you still start him. He's going to have a game like this and he's going to have better games. That's what a backup does. To me, I just kind of expected there'd be one of these games. Jordan P, a couple people saying the pick 6 was on Zach Pascal for running the wrong route. Okay. That's, and that absolutely that could be it. When you're in your end zone though, like that, you got to be extra careful, even if, so if it's, sure. I don't doubt that was on him, but man, that play, maybe they should have gone somewhere different. I don't know. Hey, either way, that wasn't his only turnover worthy throw. Real quick, Xbox Fanatic, I wish I could watch the games. I'm not dropping $4 for the season. That's fair. I will tell you, NFL Plus has a replay. You can, for like $100 a year, you get the replays. You have to wait, but you can watch them after the fact. So if you want to watch them, you can still get it, within, not too long after. So just as an aside. And they also have the condensed version, which means you can watch it in like about 45 minutes because they take out all the commercials and all the pauses and all the time running off the clock kind of stuff. So anyway, so Dobbs is a backup, a good back. I still think he's a good backup. It was just, he's going to have a game like that, right? No, you weren't, you tried it, you weren't happy with it. Okay, that's fair. So Dobbs came back down to earth. It doesn't change my thinking about him because I always thought he was kind of this guy, a guy who can run the offense well and is going to have some good games and a few bad games. Oh, it's Driftwood. What's up? Appreciate you being here, hanging out with us. So yeah, so this is what we're looking at with Dobbs. It was a rough game. He's going to have those, right? All right. So let's now get to the defense. Okay. On the defensive side of the ball, we'll take a quick look. Jalen Thompson had a good game. He got banged up. I don't know if anyone knows what kind of his status is, but he got banged up a little bit. But he had a really good game, actually an outstanding game, 86.5, 88.4 coverage grade. He still played a lot of slot corner in this game. Kaiser White had a solid game. Hamilton, right? Hamilton, they started him. He had been playing like one snap a game and had a really good game. And I think the whole question about Hamilton, why didn't the question might be, well, why haven't they been playing him all along? And this is what we get. If we want to get the young players developing, Hamilton's not a young player, so you've got a guy like Hamilton, who I think, has been really good for them over the last 3 or 4 years. Played well this game, right? But if you start him, what you're doing is you're not playing Keitrell Clark. Well, they made that decision, right? I wonder if that was because they saw this as a game they really had a chance to win and they wanted to really go after it. Or maybe we've looked at Keitrell Clark's grades. I love Keitrell Clark, but he's been up and down. He's been a rookie, right? The fact that he's been starting as a 6th rounder is impressive enough. But Hamilton, looked good, had that really nice tackle, right, to prevent a touchdown. And also had a near interception. So he had a nice game. Dimikaji continues to grade well. Maybe didn't have a huge impact in terms of, sacks or anything, but he continues to be solid. Let's look at his grades real quick. Overall, his grade for the year, 78, right? Love what we're seeing from him in terms of the development, right? So Dimikaji, in fact, let's sort this by position. Let's go with position groups a little bit here. Let me say it real quick to some of the folks who just jumped in. Thunder, thanks for being here. It's Garrett Williams time. Yeah, I'd love to see him, right? Why did he do these social media? I don't know. I heard that happened. I'm not sure why, but yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's go by position group though. Cornerbacks, right? Jalen Thompson looked really good. Hamilton looked really good, right? Keitrell Clark played 40 snaps. This is a very Keitrell Clark kind of a grade, right? 50s with maybe decent tackling grade mixed in there. So he ended up playing a good bit, right? In the end, just even though he wasn't starting. Hamilton played a lot of slot corner. This is what we've seen. But Marco Wilson, the grade, the fact that his grade isn't worse has to do, I think, with, the run defense grade here, but his coverage grade, 36.1, right? I mean, we saw what happened. Jamar Chase, though some of that, there was a couple other, there was a couple plays on a few other people, but Marco Wilson had a rough game, 36.1 coverage grade, 41.3. His run defense prevented that from being lower, but it was a rough game, right? Marco had a rough game. So I'm with as bad as the game ended up being and as good as Jamar Chase looked, I'm a little surprised that we don't see worse coverage grades, to be honest. Yes, that Marco Wilson, but I'm surprised that the coverage grades aren't worse across the board just because of, Chase torching this defense. But I guess maybe Marco got the brunt of that plus the safeties. I know Shasheri was on that one really deep play. He's one of the people covering that. His grade's low, right? The safety. So, Kevon Wallace had a decent game. He's been a nice pickup for us, right? He's graded reasonably well. Jordan P saying Cutro was benched at the start. Seems like it was disciplinary, possibly, maybe. Yeah, who knows? Yeah. Barbecue chicken. Yeah, that's what it looked like for us, right? Keytrell Clark, that's who they're saying deleted his social media. So, I'm actually surprised that the coverage grades were as good as they are here because of how the game looked, right? So Wallace still had a decent game. Going on to Cameron Thomas was playing outside linebacker, decent grade. He's graded reasonably well all year. The sacks haven't been there, but the grades have been decent. So Cameron Thomas. Zaven Collins had one of his better grades this year. He had a couple nice plays there. This is actually his best game of the year grade wise, right? 65.1. We have talked about that multiple times. New position, guy who has not been an edge rusher. Even still, same thing. His pass rushing grade wasn't horrible, but it was one of the lower grades here, right? His run defense, his tackling are better grades than his pass rush because he's still kind of developing that, right? So then we also have left outside linebacker Ojulari. He's seen. I think we're seeing a few more snaps. It's been low. It's nice to see up to 22. That's the most snaps he's had all year, right? So that's nice to see. The grade wasn't great, but the pass rush grade was good. Real quick, Kyle Ledbetter, thanks for being here, dude. Good evening. Really good dude who will do some stuff with podcasting, the Take It Easy podcast. He joined me for Mock Draft Monday this last season. Thanks for jumping in. Appreciate you, dude. Thunder, DJ, Burrow, Purdy, all slice up the secondary at will. It's a problem. It is. It's going to be a bit of a problem, right? How did Gardeck do? Had multiple pressures. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah. But Ojulari had the most snaps, so that's a plus, right? We're seeing increased snaps. His grades have been kind of like this. The coverage was pretty low. That brought it down. But the pass rush grade has been consistently. You see it, right? That's pretty consistent in the 60s. Like to see it get a little better. Like to see the snaps go up. Last week was low, but this was his most. So maybe we'll see more from him. Luqueta graded poorly, right? Gardeck had an okay game, right? You see, 65.5. It's not as good as some of his games. He was rough on the tackling and the pass rush. His coverage grade was good on only 4 snaps. So, that kind of buoyed that. So his grade was okay. He had a couple nice plays and pressures, but overall, just okay, right? Dimication, we talked about that. He continues to be good. Then let's get into the defensive line, right? Nose tackle, Leki Fotu, I know we're not excited about him, but he's been serviceable. This is, the grade there is this has been his best season, but that is a low bar, right? The 45.4, right? It's not great. But what are you going to do, right? They like what he has in terms of size and everything. Dante Stills, he had a nice game, had a sack. His grade was 63.6. Overall, reasonable grade. We look at him. He struggled the first couple games that he played, the second, third game of the season, but he was good against San Francisco, good here. So it's nice to see him coming on, right? We've talked so much about this rookie class with Paris Johnson Jr. and Keytrell Clark and Michael Wilson. Well, we talked about last week, seeing Stills, kind of flourish, right? Is seeing him start to become a player that can be part of that rotation is just another part of this draft class, right? Stills was great, right? If we had good defensive tackles, the defensive end would flourish, right? Yeah, but that's what you have with this, with a team in this rebuild, right? But again, that is an encouraging sign, right? To see him playing well, a guy that they got in the 6th round, I believe. So that's nice. Kevin Strong, had a decent game, 47 snaps, 67.3. That was a nice game. Ray Lopez, not as great, 47.1. Ben Still had a decent game, 63.6. So, Joy, we'll get to safeties in a second. So, you had some decent games from some of those defensive linemen. Let's maybe sort this by coverage snaps. We'll get to the safeties. Kevon Walsh, we talked about that. He had a decent game. Shasher, not so good. And then we had Joey Blount, a few snaps. Nothing to write home about. So the defensive line down here, it's up and down. There were some nice bits, right? Some nice players. Jose, thanks for being here. I agree. Need some DTs after LJ Collier went down. Fotu is just surviving. Listen, defensive line is going to be one of the top priorities this next year's draft. I mean, there's just there. I think they need to add at least 2 players in the draft and maybe a free agent. Preferably someone on day 1 or 2 on the defensive line. And then maybe someone in the middle rounds, so yeah, we're going to need to see that. Linebackers, Kaiser White had a good game. Josh Woods really struggled though, right? As far as the other middle linebacker, so that was rough, right? So yeah, overall, the defense, there were a couple guys who looked really good, but some that looked really bad, and it was overall ugly, right? Roy Lopez might be fun, right? Yeah, guy local, right? So, yeah, I think did he play locally? Arizona, right? Yeah. So, Alucard, thanks for being here. D-backs ahead of LA 3-0. Right. Nice. We love what we're seeing from the Diamondbacks. Go D-backs. So, real quick, let's look at what the Bengals. Let's see. We already looked at Marco Wilson. Well, real quick, let's just talk about this. So, he had a couple nice games, but has had 3 really bad games, and he now is having the worst season, at least grade-wise, of his career. So, he's regressed. So that's a concern. Real quick, Jalen Thompson, slot corner. He still played a lot of slot. Had that here, 25 snaps in slot. 7 as safety. Anyway, but let's look at what the Bengals grades were real quick. Jamar Chase, no surprise, 92.6, right? That was the game, right? Offensive line, Jonah Williams, Joe Burrow had a good game. Those were high. Ted Karras, the guy that I'd hoped the Cardinals would have signed, a couple years ago, to play offensive line. Cody Ford, only in 3 snaps, but there's a familiar face. So, the grades, there were a couple guys that were really high, then some decent grades. This was the Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow show, mostly Jamar Chase. Defensively, Hendrickson had a nice game. Jordan Battle, you see some nice grades. But then they had some rough grades, right? They had their struggles. So then finally, real quick, let's look at where things look in terms of the overall grades for the season. Marco should have thrown a shoe at Jamar. Maybe that would have stopped him, right? Yeah. So, we look at the grades here on defense, it's a little bit rough. Wilson, Hamilton's here listed as a starter, so he's pretty good grade there. Safeties, we got Thompson back as a safety now listed here, and then Wallace. White, Woods, some Woods is really struggling grade-wise, right? Jimmy Cagey looks good, but defensive line, and then we switch this over to the nickel, right? Get Gardeck in there. Get Thompson here at the nickel, Shasher and the Wallace, Wilson. The defense struggling bad, and the grades reflect it. On offense, offensive line is, Wilkinson's grades really low. It's, that's some issues there. Dobbs' grade, we see that. Connor, unfortunately, he's not going to be playing for a little bit, right? But Brown's looked good. Wilson's looked good. Rondale Moore's grade hasn't been great. Ertz's hasn't. We'll go to the 2 tight end, the 12 personnel. That gets McBride there. His grade's decent. So this is kind of where things have settled with the grades, right? Trust the process, right? But we are getting young players in there, right? I mean, the thing I didn't want to see that I'm glad we're not seeing is Zach Pascal starting over Wilson, right? We want to see Michael Wilson there. No, nothing against Zach Pascal. He's a nice depth receiver. He's a good guy to have in the building, but the fact that they are starting Wilson and committing to that, I like. The fact that we're getting Paris Johnson Jr. starting, I like. The fact that we're getting some snaps from Dante Stills is nice. Keitrell Clark, they didn't start in this game, but they still played him a lot, right? So, I think we've complained for years, right, that Vance Joseph didn't start the rookies on defense. We complained about that. We wanted them to play rookies. Well, we're getting it in a rebuild. So if we are asking for it, we need to accept it. And I'm, I was having VJ flashbacks because they didn't have Wilson till the end, right? So I'm just going to be okay with that. They're getting these guys, Jordan P saying, I think the Cardinals have found good rotational pieces moving forward. Just need to get starters. Demikage, Ledbetter, strong juniors, even still look at good rotational guys to have. So, I'm okay with it. It's year one of the rebuild. They're showing what I want to see. They're competitive. Yes, they're getting beat based on talent, but they're competitive. They're playing the rookies, getting them some experience. So the grades are rough. It was a rough game, but trust the process. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. Tomorrow night, we're going to have TCR Live with Josh Butts, who's a Bengals fan and a podcaster. We're going to talk about the game in a little less of a, grade-oriented way. And we'll go from there. But thanks for hanging out with us. Real quick, I got a question. Will you start mock draft Monday when we officially get eliminated from playoffs, or when the season's over? I will wait till the season's over because we might get eliminated from playoffs pretty early. So it'll be after the season, but probably pretty quick after the season. Last season I did. So Robert saying play the rookies, let them make the mistakes so they can learn from them. That's the only way they'll get better, 100%. Jose, enjoy your night. Go D-backs. Thank you. You enjoy your night as well. Everyone, thanks for being here. I am going to put up the shout out to channel members, and then we'll get out of here with the theme song that my buddy recorded for me. Everyone loves that, right? Thanks for being here. We'll see y'all next time. Peace.
Hey, yo, it's Joe. He's the host of Mock Draft Monday on the Cardinal Show. So join the live, hit like and subscribe. Enjoy the podcast tonight. Enjoy the podcast tonight.